Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. My guest today is my friend Susan Pieper. We knew each other when we both lived in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, one of the most beautiful places in the world and one of the greatest places to live, and neither one of us live there now. And Susan, you've had an extraordinary life. Just in the short time that I've known you, you've had an extraordinary life, and I'd like you to kind of give us an idea of what you do, and what you have done, and what you've accomplished, and what it is that you see for your life going forward. That's a lot of things.
Oh, wow, that's big. Okay, well, I like to start. Hello, everybody. I'm Susan. I like to start where I am right now. I like to ground.
Yeah.
So I would say that where I am right now is in Park City, Utah. Moved here in November, and I am about 6 weeks in to building a new life as a solopreneur. And I'm leaving that very broad because I haven't decided. I believe in the saying that when you pick a niche, you get rich. And I realize niche and rich don't perfectly rhyme. But people say that, it's kind of true. Anyway, and I haven't picked exactly what I'm focusing on. But what areas that interest me are really areas where I think that people are in, we'll call it crucible moments in their life. And I'm a business person. I'm not a therapist, so I usually don't focus on divorce or, any child custody. I focus on fundraising, exiting your business, and making a career pivot, not just a career change, not a job change, but a career pivot, like these extremely difficult points that are related to business. And because that's my expertise. So for your listeners, I'll back up and just give you a quick bio. And it's going to be a little bit of a long form. It won't be just, the last 5 years. I'm going to go way back. So I grew up in Ohio, and I was the daughter of a single parent, and I felt a very strong need to get external validation. So I was the high school valedictorian, and then I went to Ohio State, and I graduated from Ohio State summa cum laude with distinction, and was President Jennings Top 10 Senior on homecoming court, president of my pledge class in my sorority, vice president of my sorority, campus leader in like 5 different organizations, and with like a 3.98 GPA. I then got hired, and almost no one I knew did. I was like the first non-Ivy League hire at McKinsey and Company, and I moved from Ohio to Pittsburgh and became a business analyst at McKinsey and Company. I went from McKinsey and Company to Harvard Business School, graduated with distinction from Harvard Business School, and went back into consulting, but not to McKinsey. I worked for a nice chapter in consulting, but chose to leave my job in consulting before making partner, something I regret. I was a senior manager and then ended up in doing C-suite roles in technology because at that point I'd moved out to San Francisco, and it was like the internet phase, and I tend to be this moth to a light and go to where all the action is, and so I couldn't miss out on that fun. And I held C-suite roles really mostly in business development and in marketing, growing tech companies, and had 3 exits. Then my family situation just was such that we needed to move back east. And I, at that point, 3 stepkids and an us kid. And we moved back east and lived in Greenwich, Connecticut. And for a variety of reasons, I felt like I really needed to get back into my career again. And I made a massive pivot from tech back into financial services. I became a senior hedge fund recruiter and worked with some of the top funds in the world, and was super successful at placing senior portfolio manager and risk officers in hedge funds. Then, if that wasn't enough, I went over to a friend's boutique merchant bank and built their advisory board. So totally different from what I had done before, consulting, tech, financial services. Then a little change came our way, which was that my ex-husband and I decided that he should take a job in Tokyo, Japan. So we picked up the family and moved from Greenwich, Connecticut to Tokyo, rented out the house in Greenwich. And I once again found myself like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And at that point, my youngest son was entering second grade and couldn't read. And I didn't know it because I had been working so hard for like the last 6 years. I mean, like when you're a hedge fund recruiter or you're working in a boutique merchant bank, like you don't have a holiday. I just remember taking client phone calls from like Nantucket and, Martha's Vineyard. And like every vacation we took, I was always, interrupted with client work because client service came first. So I didn't know that my son couldn't read. And I spent 3 years a as a mom, and I'd been a mom, but I'd always had, a nanny or a full-time au pair, so it was really an interesting point where my son and I got really close, and he ended up getting a lot of remediation to overcome dyslexia, and now is a fantastic reader and has graduated from college. Anyway, after Tokyo, we decided to move back to the United States, and that's when we moved to Jackson Hole. And in Jackson Hole, I was married. The older kids were out of the house. I had a fifth grader who was becoming a snowboarder in the snowboarding program. And my ex-husband and I reached a conclusion that after 20 years, we didn't think it made sense to continue. So I got divorced, became a single parent, and decided to start a business related to the outdoor that my son loved, which was snowboarding. And that was my former business called DMOS Collective, the pro shovel tools company. So I spent about 9 years building a local brand, which was a crazy thing because everyone was like, it's a shovel. And I was like, no, 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 this is a 6061 aluminum shovel that's fully full size, fully collapsible, and can do a lot of things. So we created a grudge purchase. We created the luxury good in the shovel space that ended up being bought by a lot of overlanding and sprinter van enthusiasts, as well as obviously backcountry enthusiasts. So I ended up selling that business after surviving COVID with it, which was no fun. And we sold it in April of last year. And then a week later, my mom died. And then I just found myself in kind of the current of needing to restructure my life and getting ready for, I've done 6 competitive off-road navigation rallies as a driver. That's a 4x4 car. And this is a passion that I developed because I ended up with an automotive accessories business. And so I really leaned into it. And next thing you know, I'm a sponsored driver. So last year, after selling my business, I leaned into training and we did great and had a fantastic performance in October. Came back from the rally, closed on the sale of my house in Jackson, bought a house in Park City, promptly broke my arm. And then I've been organizing my house, getting healthy, and figuring out really what's next phase since. So that's my story.
It's an amazing story. Um, you do not take things casually, do you? You
No,
you dive into it with everything you've got, and
people
um,
call me Send It Susan. I have a lot of nicknames, and that is definitely one of them.
and and how do I ask this question? I want to know um, how you have managed to keep your sanity through all of this. I guess that's a way of saying it because so many people I know that if they went through all the changes that you have, all the stress, pressure, created a world-class business, sold the business, was a competitive off-road driver. I mean, that list of things that you have accomplished is really significant and amazing, and yet you're just as normal as everyone else that I've had on the podcast, which is to your credit, I think. And so, how do you keep your kind of head and your balance and your sense of order as you go through all these challenging experiences?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. I did as I think I should tell your audience, but I told Ed this before the call. I actually am going to Dancing with the Stars in Salt Lake tonight. So I have hair and makeup done to go out tonight. And I needed it all done because I have another call. So anyway, I don't always look this composed. A lot of times I'm just, like rolling out of bed with a ball cap and coming straight in from the gym and working late and whatever. But yeah, so you're catching me on a day that I think I look put together. But I really feel that um, it has taken me years to develop a friendship with resilience where it's not painful anymore, and it's also not a punishment to have to go through challenging things, but to embrace the challenges and to recognize that I really try to aim for middle of the road. I actually don't ride the highs too high. I don't ride the lows too low. When things get really down, I've always got that like this too shall pass. And largely it's because I have really lived through some really challenging things. And I think that I think that I should tell everybody that 10 years ago I decided I'd had enough alcohol, so I decided to go pro and retire early. So I have been sober for 10 years, and that has helped me tremendously because I don't turn to anything. I don't have 5 o'clock wine time, and I don't have, I don't take anything. It's sort of like you kind of find this place with yourself where you have to meet yourself in a moment of, like, what is this moment trying to teach me? Or what is this? What can I get from this? And, how do I need to take care of myself right now? Like, I often ask myself, how do I take care of myself? Or what is this trying to teach me all the time? And I am kind and practice a lot of self-compassion. You can tell I've done a lot of meditating and been to a lot of various, I'm not religious, but a lot of spiritual retreats. And I think that it's taught me to find a relationship with my own higher power as I define it, and to, trust the path and trust the journey and be really open to the magic and the wonder of life. And I'm really, I really live in that space of spirit. And then I just love adventure.
Well, I've thought about you often over the years because of, we were surrounded by people who were doing startups and they were entrepreneurs and they were creative people in terms of business, that sort of thing. But of all of those people, I see you as the one who excelled above all of them in what you created with DMOS. And
Thank you for saying that.
I was just so impressed with that you had, and I see that as talent. I think that you had the talent to create something that connected with a certain segment of the population, and that really, to me, spoke highly of who you are, and 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 it it was cool to watch you operate and to watch you develop. And 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 I felt like that a lot of that had to do with the fact that you were very clear about who you are and you know who you are, and you were not spending a lot of time doubting who you are. You were not spending a lot of time worrying about, say, imposter syndrome and things like that. That you were very clear and you're very focused, and you were going forward with what your ambition was. And I think that's a fantastic thing. And it just um, and I've wanted to say that to you for since
Thank you. I
I met
appreciate
you.
that.
Because so many of the other people I knew, they had their ideas. I have my ideas, and we all searching for how we're going to express them and find some way of achieving something that is beyond what we expected. But most of us didn't do that. Most of us we kept trying, we keep working, but it never kind of got to the point where you excelled. I mean, I remember watching you on TV and watching you on when you were in the SEMA competition,
Thank you. Yeah.
and I think I know her. It's really cool. I love that. And So I'm just wanting you to know that you had an impact upon me just in inspiring me to continue to be whatever I was thinking I was supposed to be and striving on because I said, well, she's done something of real worth, and I'm I want to be like that.
Oh, I really appreciate that. But I've definitely had that little devil of self-doubt on my shoulder before. And it wasn't as much in like once I really embraced that I knew that we made products that really help people and I listened and I was connecting so much to our customers, I didn't have doubt about that. But I did have a lot of doubt about um I mean, it got really hard. I had to fix things in the business. I had to fix our margins. I had to fix our supply chain. And like, it really wasn't room for imposter syndrome. But I was like, I hadn't had a formal training in mechanical engineering. And now, I mark up CAD drawings and design products and have 7 patents. And it's just like there was just no choice. It was just what needed to be done. And I recognized there were times that I was definitely outside of my zone of genius. And part of the reason in selling demos, I think, is that I have recognized that I'm really not happy doing supply chain management and purchasing and quality assurance. I love design. I love design and I love creative thinking. And I am a strategist, a branding person, someone who thinks a lot about product market fit. And I drove all of our creative and made that brand. And what I really am looking forward to in this next phase is just not being responsible for a warehouse supply chain or quality.
Well,
Because that is tough. Can I tell you those people? Those people are
but
tough
but
and detail oriented.
one of the conversations I do have with entrepreneurs is you have this great idea and you're giving everything you have to it and you're beginning to achieve this thing that you have dreamed about achieving
Right.
and then I ask them, so when is it that you turn it over to someone else? And that's one of the hardest questions to answer because you don't know until maybe that morning when you wake up, hey, it's time to turn this over to someone else. And because you recognize I've done all that I can to take this to where it is today, and now someone needs to take it from here.
So it's interesting because one of the things that I'm working on, and I'm going to pick one. I won't pick them all. Like I've got like 4 or 5 things I've been thinking about, is I've been thinking a lot about creating a masterclass type tool for people to do exit planning because I don't think enough people ask themselves, when am I going to get off this merry-go-round? And I think I did build my business from the get-go to sell it because I knew going in that I would not want to run. I mean, I did some consulting when I was in New York with a $1 billion manufacturer of consumer products. And the guy who ran the wholesale business is a good friend of mine. And, just that level of, dealing with pricing matrices for your wholesale accounts and inventory and discounting and margin management and all of the op stuff, I was always like, no, 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 somebody else will end up, like that's going to be for somebody else. I will get it to a point where it's profitable and somebody else will scale it. And I want to get out then because that's not something I enjoy doing. But I think people wait too long to seek exit. And, venture capitalists, when they invest in a business, they sort of want to invest for sort of 5 to 7 years. But if you're the founder, I encourage people to think about getting a quick exit as quickly as possible because there are so many deals to be had and you're not going to like run out of ideas of deals. And we also have, an IRR. So our IRR is fast or is higher if we can exit sooner. So I think that, not spending too long on something and forcing yourself to look at whether you're in your zone and, and having a deliberate plan of who's who would ultimately be interested in your business, and so that you're building your business in a direction where it would be of interest to an acquirer, I think is so smart. So I want to help people with that.
I totally understand that. I'm really good at quitting. Not
Oh,
not early. I mean, but quitting at the right time. Like I published my this book in 2018, and I knew that at some point I was going to do a follow up. I figured, well, I'm going to wait 5 years before I start doing that. And so I started working on that about 2 years ago. It's been 7 years, and I had, I have pads of notes, and I have some things that I've been writing on Substack, kind of exploring a lot of this. And I got to the end of February, and I realized I'm just repeating myself. And so I abandoned the book. I abandoned it. It's gone. I'm not going to do anything more with it. And what emerged was all this new space to think about other things and to approach things that had never shown itself to me as something I should be invested in. And
I
that's
love that. Yeah, I love that. I think that that's one of those, I'm not somebody who maybe, I don't know, you might not think that I drop things, but I do. I mean, I do have, sort of certain ideas that I'll look at, and I'm pretty comfortable just discarding them. As much as I also purge, old possessions and things like that in my house. I've been really trying to just keep the things that I love. That's it.
well, the interesting thing that emerged in from this abandonment um, was the experience of hearing some poets read their poetry in a public event. And I said, that's really amazing. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to be a poet. That's not what I'm saying. But I reached out to some of them, and some of them have been introduced to me. So I'm creating a whole new segment of the podcast of just poets. So I'm going to have a playlist of poets, the Eddie Network poets,
That's
and
cool.
and what I'm finding is, as I'm talking to these people, is that they're going to be a cutting edge of people gaining awareness about who they are and what's going on in the world because they're not wrapped up in their heads, but they're much more kind of expressing things that are more embodied for them, and they're having to put some rhythm and some sound to it. It's not just words, it's not just sentences, it's phrases, and it's really interesting to me. It's really interesting. And where's that lead? I don't know where that leads. It doesn't matter really where it leads. It's just leading. And I think that's where we are today, is that we've kind of hit this moment of transition in the world where um, people have the permission to try new things and to become different than they ever thought themselves to be.
I think that's so true. I think that it is a great moment of permission. And I also think it is, um, I think that, well, we haven't even mentioned the words artificial intelligence, but it is certainly changing everything about what the world of work is.
Yeah.
So it not only gives people permission, but it also kind of gives them a mandate that, like, everybody's got to change. Like, it's going to be interesting. It's a great time to be alive.
I meet with a group on Fridays, and most of them are from the UK, and one of them is a very into artificial intelligence, and it's really interesting. Listen to him just talk about what he's learning, and and he's learning things that I'm not interested in, but he's learning it, and I keep saying, so what's the context? What's the context? And the context is your life. How does this affect your life? And when I reached out to you and we had a little bit of communication prior to today. You were talking about this new venture that you're going into. It's sort of a coach or a consultant or a teacher. I don't know what the right word to be, but it seems that you have this thing that you want to convey to the world, and that you're kind of inviting people to listen and to join you in this. And so let's talk a little bit about that. What is it that has kind of come to you after all of this tremendous experience of success that brings you to today and where you're headed?
Let's see. Well, I guess I would say that I've definitely been there, done that. And it occurred to me at a certain point that that the people that have been players before, it's not always borne out by statistics, but there is a sense that people who've been players can often make the best coaches. And the one that comes to my mind is the late great, I think I do think he passed away. It was Billy Beane, who was the
Mhm.
protagonist in the book by Michael Lewis and ultimately the movie called Moneyball.
Yeah.
And I just loved his story of how he decided once he basically got onto the management side, became the manager of the Oakland A's, of how he wanted to create and do it differently with drafting a team and how they were going to spend their salary cap on players. And I feel like it's like I just recognize that there's just a part of me that just feels like I don't know why. I feel like I'm like Billy Beane. I'm like going to the other side now. And I want to help founders and highly ambitious people, but I want to help them do it differently and like be way more successful. And it's taking my combined experience, all of my successes and all of my failures, and kind of where I'm at right now, again, thinking a lot about artificial intelligence and tools and force multipliers and accelerators because listen, time stands still for no one. I mean, people nowadays are doing a Substack, they're doing a podcast, they're doing a website, they've got books. It's really complex around how you can reach the market and be a change maker. And I love thinking about force multipliers and just how to do it in a way that is scrappy and innovative. And it's leveraging a lot of my experience, like I said, from the been there, done that standpoint.
So,
So I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah,
that's kind of where I'm.
it does make sense. Oh, yeah. And because I think it's a natural evolution of where you have been. And now, I mean, figured out what you've learned, if you haven't figured out what you've learned at this point in your life, then it's time to figure out what you have learned at this point in your life. And when you
Right.
figure out what you have learned, then it's something to offer to people, and particularly people say are younger, a generation or two younger, because I think that they're coming on and they have opportunities that you and I didn't have when we were, you know, in our 20s or in our 30s. And they may not see it that way, but from my perspective, they have opportunities because we worked in very kind of there were a lot of constraints because of the institutional structures that we were provided, once we finished college and we went on to all the things we did. And some of us, me in particular, um, did not fit well within those constraints. And so you know, I just had to figure out to do other things. And I kept finding those institutional structures not very compatible with who I saw myself to be. And that's still true. And I'm in my 70s now. And I still don't find those institutional structures very compatible to me, but I learned how to work within them and as the outsider. So I think that that's a part of what is the opportunity that we have as we get a little older and we've had some success and we look forward to, well, how long do I want to live? Do I want to live to 100 years old? If I'm going to live to 100, I'm gonna I got another third half of life to live. So
Very true.
that's,
Very true. Yeah, and I don't know if I would be a great executive advisor for a 25-year-old, actually. I think that they approach life so differently. I kind of feel like my target client is probably between 35 and 55.
mhm.
I'm 58. And I think that it's because they too did not grow up, if you're 50 or 55 or 40, you didn't necessarily really grow up again with artificial intelligence or with TikTok or with social media. And I think that we're all kind of in it together, figuring it out. And then you combine that with running an organization, building, making sure you got product market fit, making sure you've got an exit plan, knowing how to fundraise, selling yourself when you're the product. These are all themes that I think a lot about. And it's just really challenging. Oh, and you're probably, in the middle of your raising family, being a partner, and that's definitely a lot. I mean, I did a lot of working while I was raising kids and being a partner, and it was certainly challenging.
I found that a lot of the people that I ended up having a continual interaction with were people who were in their 30s and who had come to realization that their career was in a sense over and that it was time to reinvent themselves and they had to change. And I mean, I talked to someone yesterday who's in their late 30s and they're already sensing, I need to change. I have to do something different than I've been doing. And and I did that. I mean, I became a consultant when I was 42. Um, and I didn't know I'd never been a consultant, never run a business, so I just started it.
Wow.
But that's what I'm finding is that there are a lot of people who are in that middle or kind of that late early career stage where it's time now for them to step forward and maybe create something like you have done. You created this business that was highly successful, and you were in your 40s when you did that. You started that, right?
It's 48.
Yeah. See?
Yeah.
And that's that perfect age for a lot of people to depart from what they have been doing because I think that they bring a lot of the expectations that older generations have placed on them that they have to do a certain thing. You have to kind of follow these rules. You got to be a rule follower. And what they realize they get hit 40, 42, 43, and they realize I don't have to do that anymore. I can break all the rules. I can go start something. I can be someone totally different. And it's really exciting and it's fun to know those people and to see how they can flourish with just a little bit of encouragement.
I completely agree with you. And again, this is sort of an interesting conversation for me today, and I'm grateful for it because I feel like I am mulling all of these different sort of topics that we're talking about today to try to pick one to sort of like go with. And I think that there is a huge amount of interest by people who've left, consulting, corporate, even maybe even venture capital or sales or something like that, or tech, like people who kind of get to the point where they're like, I don't want to do this forever, and they're in their 40s and they want to become an entrepreneur. And it's like time to buy a franchise, or it's time to start a business from scratch, or and it's a totally different game. And I think that those are the kind of pivots or those moments that I just love to work on,
Yeah,
love to help people with, love to think.
I have one friend who worked. He was a top level person in a large corporation, and but he was doing different things than the he had a different role to play than the typical manager and or the typical vice president, and and he knew that he needed to do something different, and and we had so many conversations about that, and but he didn't want to leave until it was time to leave. And
Oh, yeah.
and um, and so he finally left last year because they wanted him to move, and he didn't want to move. He wanted to keep his family, and so yeah, and so he started looking for, and now he's now found a position, and he started a new position, and it's really exciting because I know that he's going to flourish in this new role that he has because he has been kind of held back by his former work, but he's got all this energy for doing something new and something different, and he's just going to be outstanding in what he's doing. And so,
Well, isn't it interesting how it's funny because maybe this is what you were talking about at the beginning of the call, but I feel like, isn't it interesting how, especially with career pivots, you really have to be passionate about it. That's what I think you saw in me with Demos, is that you knew that I was not holding back at all. I went, I went right in and was like, no, no, I am passionate about this. I'm not half. I was all the way in. And
yes,
I see a lot of times people trying to make pivots where they want to stay a little reserved or a little agnostic about it, or it doesn't quite, it's like it's too much up here in their head, it's not in their heart,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
want to sell, but they can't because no, I mean, it's a little like you and I would know if somebody was trying to sell to us. I call it commission breath, and they're going for the close, and you're like, no, I don't even need that thing. But similarly, these people, maybe it's not commission breath, but it's almost like I call them the disengaged. They're like, hire me. Well, why? Because I have the resume. And you're like, well, that doesn't feel like you should be hired. I don't even get that. But so many people are kind of missing that spark of their why. Like, what's their why? Even in corporations, you have to have a why. Even in kind of dry jobs, it still has to be some why.
and that why needs to constantly be scrutinized and developed and expanded because otherwise you're taking what you knew, let's say 10 years ago, and said, okay, that's it. That's my why. When my experience is that my why is constantly expanding and changing. I mean, it's when when I started my consulting practice, my goal was to help local organizations, businesses, nonprofits, develop leadership for serving their community. So it was a community oriented focus, and I was doing consulting and I was problem solving, and that's still where I am, but I have a different way of talking about it. So now I'm interested in seeing people take personal initiative to create impact that benefits their local communities. And that's different than I'm going to support this organization or that organization. And what I find is that when you go to that person or you have that conversation with that person and you say, you have something here to contribute, you really should consider that. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. About a month after I moved here last year, I was sitting in a bar watching the NCAA basketball tournament, and this guy comes in, walks in, and sits down next to me. I'm sitting at the bar, and we start talking, and it turns out he's a financial guy from some big company in Atlanta, and they have a home here, and so we were having a nice chat, and he says, "So what do you do?" He says, "Well, I'm a writer." I write on leadership topics, and I have a podcast. Oh, what's your podcast about? I was telling him. He said, "So who do you want on your podcast?" And I turned in my chair and I put my arm throughout the whole room. And I said, "Everyone in this room has something to contribute, and I would love to talk with every one of them to help them identify that and to share that with the world." And he said, "Wow." So that's kind of the mission or the purpose. But the question is, how do you measure that? How do you measure the influence or the impact that you're having with people, and that continues to be, I think, one of the things that people don't have a very good grasp on, because I think what I see, particularly in people who are very engaged with social media, is that they want to be influential. But what does that actually mean? What does it mean to be influential? I'm not really sure
Yeah,
what that means.
I know.
Say, so why don't you just have an impact? Why don't you go change something for the better where you live? And that's a different way of looking at things. And
Mhm.
so when you're 40 or 45 or 50 or 58 or 71, why don't you ask the question, so what is it that I can change right now that can make a difference that matters where I live? That's the kind of way I'm approaching everything I do now. And it really doesn't have an institutional form to it at all. It's just how
Mhm.
I end up relating to people.
Mhm. Who is it? Is it Mother Teresa or is it Helen Keller about like one voice changing the world or something? I don't know. There's quotes from both of them, I think, about just the power of the individual. Maybe you know what I'm talking about.
I
Can
do.
you, what is it?
I know the idea. I don't know which
Yeah,
one of them,
yeah. I don't know. Yeah. But I was just thinking, yeah, it's true.
but I see that you had that kind of impact with the people that you encountered through the work you did with DMOS. And I followed you on your treks, your mountain treks. And
Thank you.
I could see how that also, being an entrepreneur in that, I mean, I don't know what the other women were who were in the program or in the competition, what their background was, but your background didn't would necessarily lend itself to thinking, oh, well, she's going to go out and be an off-road champion.
No,
But
no.
there you
Well,
are.
are you talking about the women that I off-road with? Or are you talking about
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
those women.
oh, those women? Yeah. Yeah. I think that so many more of them grew up with a tie to off-road,
Uh-huh.
through a brother or a dad, and I didn't have any of that.
See that's what is interesting to me is someone who says, I don't have any background here, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to learn this. I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to make this have some significance in my life.
Been challenging. One of the things that I'm really troubled by, or sort of not really troubled by, but I would say playfully turning over in my head, is that there are only 4 women in the United States who are international four-wheel drive training instructors. That is an acronym. It's I4WDTA. Anyway, the rest of the people that are certified, there aren't that many of them, a couple dozen men. And what that is if you get that certification, you as a leader are able to be hired by the automotive companies or by government or by trail groups or private paying clients. You have that certification to take people off-roading and to train them on off-road recovery. Because off-roading isn't just driving off-road, it's getting stuck. And so the guys that do it, and I say guys because it's mostly guys, a lot of them have like an army background where they were recovery specialists for tanks. And I mean, like, I was a liberal arts major who was a cheerleader in Ohio. I've been thinking about like, do I want to go for that? Do I want to go for that leadership designation? Because I'm going to be doing coaching and advisory service with these high performing executives. And I may also work with them on off road. And I just haven't decided, I guess. I've been playfully turning that over and being like, am I just chasing another Boy Scout merit badge here, or is this something that would really be good for me? I haven't decided.
Well, I think whether it's whichever it is, it'll be good for you.
Yes, whichever it
because
is.
it's a challenge that you take on to expand your abilities and to expand your reach. And once you accomplish that, then that leads to something else. You don't know what it leads to.
I know you don't.
It
And the thing is, it is, there's no question it's a leadership role because it's a leadership role, because we just said it's a leadership role. And in a recovery situation, this is a lot like being like an EMT or something like that. There's one person in charge. And, people's lives could be at risk and, things can break and they're under pressure. And it's definitely got that like kind of danger and recovery and leadership. So it has interesting elements to it. And I'm not like a control freak of like, oh my goodness, I'm the best recovery person ever. But it's more that I'm intrigued about, putting all the pieces together and teaching, because I would be teaching others and bringing others along. As a trainer, I would be teaching others.
is that a community that you enjoy?
Uh, I enjoy a lot of the people in the community. I mean, I'm a little bit of a dilettante. I was a sailor for a long time. So just being in the desert and being in the mountains like I do now is always getting the more that the years go on, it seems strange to me that I'm not doing both, but I do enjoy it. Absolutely. And
I
the people that I know through the community are really cool.
over
And
your
they're great leaders.
over your left shoulder there, is that a trophy?
There is a trophy, and it is from Trans-Pacific Yacht Race in 1995.
What
And
was it?
I was the co-navigator, and we won the Navigators Award.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, that's there.
So you continue to challenge yourself, and I think that's a great example to all of us.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there's one personal side to that I will share with you and with your listeners. And that is that, I recently lost my mother last year, and she died of dementia she was only 85. And she was in a memory care unit for the last 2 years. And before that, I moved her to assisted living in like 19, I'm sorry, in 2018. And let's see, so she turned 80 in 2019. So she was 79. And I am just so determined, knowing that I have a genetic predisposition to dementia. And dementia has a couple forms. Alzheimer's, I don't know that you can prevent. Alzheimer's is like actually, I'm not sure. I think it's a buildup of plaque in your brain.
Mhm.
But my mother had what's called vascular dementia, and vascular dementia tends to be, and I'm not, please don't like think that this is like a medical talk, but I believe it coexists alongside like congestive heart failure. So think of somebody that is stagnant in their life and they're not moving, they're not outside, they live alone, they're not playing games, they quit short-term memory games like reading fiction. And I just don't want to die that way. I would so much rather, um, you know, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we don't get to pick how we die, but, and I don't want to get morbid about that, but I just don't want to end up in memory care and
Yeah, I
just
totally understand that.
I just can't even. So I feel like the push to continue moving,
Yeah.
growing, and learning is my best defense. I can't, say what's going to happen, but I am definitely somebody who works out all the time, and, movement is a big important part of my life, and it really wasn't for my mom. So I'm hoping that that'll help, prevent it. My son would be miserable if I was in memory care because he's also so into movement. I just can't imagine doing it to him. So yeah.
So you skiing a lot there in Park City?
I didn't move here for the skiing. Jackson's way better for skiing. I mean, don't tell any PS people here in Park City. I don't mean to diss your city. So I wouldn't say that that's mostly what I've been doing here, but I'm a big biker, and biking is really good here.
Hmm.
Um, and I may start, I have a sprinter van, and I may start bringing my sprinter van down to Baja in the winter. And, maybe it's going to be foiling. I'm really interested in taking up foiling. I'm interested in spending more time surfing. As I mentioned, I was a sailor for a long time and I consider myself a water person. So I'd love to split my time between mountains and water.
Sounds
That's
good.
my life.
So, what if people would like to contact you or be in touch with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I would say I have a website, and my contact information is all on my website, including my mobile number, and that is at spiper, Pieper .co. You can also reach me through LinkedIn if you ask me to connect. And I'm pretty careful about monitoring my DMs in LinkedIn. And if they needed to and they wanted my contact information directly, I'm happy for you to share it. So you can reach out to Ed. And yeah, looking forward to being a part of the conversation with your listeners for sure. Maybe there's somebody out there who heard this conversation and is like, I need to talk to that woman. And I'd love to hear from them.
Yeah. Well, I hope that would happen. Well, I'm really glad that we could reconnect, and I'm glad you've been on here. And I learned a lot about you that I didn't know before, and so I'm happy for you. I'm happy for the fact that you're in this new stage, and you're going to move forward in some ways that maybe are different than you've ever done. And how exciting is that?
Yes, how exciting is that? And I almost feel it's guaranteed. It's going to happen.
Yes, well, I wouldn't expect it any other way from you. You know, you're so determined, and that's great. So, well, thank you everyone for watching. I hope this has been
The
inspiring.
hardest things.
Uh, we, we
Thank you.
start over there. We've been having some breaks in the internet. Um, so here we go. I hope everyone has been inspired by what you've heard today. You can start things, you can do things that maybe you never would have done previously. But if you just take that first step of initiation, you may find that your whole life will be transformed simply by you taking action. And that's what I see in Susan, and I think that's what we share. And thank you for being here, and
Really appreciate
I
you
look forward to
having me.
seeing you sometime in the future. And
I
so,
enjoyed it. Thanks,
and,
everybody.
and we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.